As we give people a moment to dial in, I'm going to proceed to show the antitrust policy notice. We show this at the beginning of every meeting. The intention is to make it very clear how we all interact and make sure everyone is comfortable. If you're from a Linux Foundation member company, you can talk to our counsel, Andy Updegrove, with any questions. And of course, you can find the full antitrust policy notice on the Linux Foundation website. The topic of conversation for this meeting, and I guess for all of the meetings that will be happening in the near term, is the supplier education leaflet, which Nathan has begun to work on in late April. So this is a document designed to help make it easy to educate people from zero into using open source effectively and in the context of good license compliance and now increasingly good security practices. If you check the chat, you'll find a link to this document so you can join in and have a look at it yourself. Now, for this particular meeting, it looks like we have a pretty small crowd, in which case I suggest we have a look at a couple of the comments that Nathan has made on the document and see if there is anything we would like to close. Scrolling down, we see that Nathan has made some editorial comments. Well, in that case, I suggest we regard those as something we can accept. We have some notes of stuff that's not necessary. It's the same. Open source is distributed. The distributor is required to comply with the terms and conditions of the license. Yeah, I think so. Mary just pointed out there was redundancy. Another change here. Suggested change around to in. Another good comment from Mary. So let's do that. Moving down, good point. There's a comment here that a sentence that says a document being licensed under CC0 is effectively public domain. Mary Matron suggests that we don't add that extra comment about public domain and instead just link to the CC0 license. Does anyone have any comment about that? Does anyone have any thoughts or suggestions about that on this line?
Hey Shane, it's Anna here.
Anna.
Hi, I think it's a quite good suggestion from Mary, since public domain isn't defined the same all over the globe, right? So you have very different understandings of what public domain is. So this calling it effectively public domain might cause some misunderstandings, while linking it to the CC0 makes it very clear what is meant.
A perfect point. So let's just do that right now.
I think personally, I would probably have the Creative Commons in it. So it is licensed under Creative Commons CC0, but I don't mind either way.
Okay. What I've done is
we could just look up the short identifier, the SPDX.
Sorry, go ahead.
Short
My
identifier.
apologies.
Or licensed under the Creative Commons CC0 license.
Great.
I'm just a bit nervous about going straight into jargon, basically.
Got it. Where's the jargon? I lost a bit of audio there, so I'm a little behind.
I'm sorry, Shane. I said that I think my best version would be it is licensed under Creative Commons CC0 rather than just straight CC0, because that assumes people kind of know what CC0 is, or even Creative Commons CC0 license. Just a little bit more information, considering this is kind of going to people who know nothing, I guess.
Perhaps that. So now it directly says that it uses the Creative Commons CC0 license. I link to that, and then talks about being maintained by us. Oh, Nathan has just joined the call. Nathan, I must hand over to you for your steady guidance.
Provided under the.
Okay. There we go. Nathan, I'll hand over to you here to chair the meeting as the chairperson. Thank you, Martin,
Okay.
and thank you.
Shane, so yeah, sorry, I'm now back in the office. We're running between buildings, so I apologize for jumping on late. So thank you, Shane, for starting this though. So yeah, welcome to everyone. Hello. Shane, do you want to keep sharing, or do you want me to switch over, or what would you like to do?
I'll hand over to you to share the document so you have full control. And just so you know, we just went and added a couple of points based on existing comments from Mary Matrin. That's all.
Okay. Sounds great. All right, is everyone able to see that okay?
It's looking good.
Okay. All right, if you don't mind me asking, oh, sorry, where did you leave off, Shane?
A very good question. So I just left off before we hit where exactly you are now. You just got to definition of open source, and we were just about to get to that point in the document. So the top of your screen is exactly where we were just about to arrive.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so I think the prior issue that someone had called out is, hey, let's just make these all statements or make them all questions. I think it looks like the votes led toward making them all statements, and if that's okay, we would continue to do that. So. I think the other issue I wanted to bring is perhaps, like, you know, I know this is supposed to be the agenda, and so I think, you know, having some narrative in here, you know, can break up that flow a little bit, and I think some of this that we highlighted could go farther down. If, you know, I want to see if anyone had any opinions here on that. I think this particular paragraph is possibly helpful, just letting you know about how these issues work together, but it's also—
I concur with the direction. It sounds good.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Well, I will take a note to move these farther down then. Let's see here. Why don't I put a smiley face by that, if that's okay? And we will go back and make those edits. So. Okay, and I think we had an agreement here with that one. So if it's okay, then I'll move on from the agenda onto the next. I think that's the main feedback we had for this section. So I'll move on to the next section here. By the way, I do want to say, first of all, though, before we get into too far, I wanted to thank the Japan work group for this document, though, because I think, you know, none of the edits we're making reflect any sort of, you know, anything on that document is other than thanks for your creating it. They did an excellent job with it. So, all we'd like to do is just add our ideas to it. So thank you. Shane, can I ask, when I looked through this, I was suggesting some subsections, but I think this version, at least, the markdown that I'd copied over, I think part of this was intended to keep it fairly basic, so it could be dropped into something more,
Right.
That appears in a nicer way, right? So.
Exactly. I mean, once
Okay.
we're done with this, we'll be prettifying it into printable versions and so on. So we
Okay.
should probably regard this as the skeleton, the core material, and then it'll be mixed by us and by others into beautiful end products.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. Otherwise, why don't I just pause? I'll just take a short pause and just let people jump in if they wish. In terms of substantive changes. Otherwise, I guess I will consider ratified whatever we suggested if I don't hear anything. Is that
the
okay,
only
Shane?
thing that struck me was that the part of it just above where you are now, the definition of open source, maybe we can do a little bit of more alignment with the ISO standard and so on. So, I'm just going to put in the chat what the ISO standard says. Bear with me for 1 second as I pull up the exact document.
Okay.
Okay. So,
and Shane, I think I had a comment. I'm not seeing it here. Wonder if it's a little buried, but.
So in the chat, I'm just
delete it.
Oh, okay. So this is from the ISO standard. The definition of open source is this dry definition. And maybe we could combine the existing definition of open source with this dry definition so that, we have more alignment with the ISO standard.
Okay. And I apologize for jumping around here. I'm just looking for your comment, Shane.
Oh, I didn't put a comment on the document yet. I'll do that for sake of completeness. Hang on, doing it now.
I will say, Shane, when I find a definition, I usually try to both acknowledge the OSI and the Free Software Foundation's versions, and so I wonder if we should do that as well.
So the comment I just put in is to just take some of the text from the ISO standard.
Okay. Perfect. Okay.
Or we could say, for the purposes of this document, our definition is these ones.
I like that.
That's a good idea, because one thing that came up was that people would sometimes say, are you trying to redefine open source, et cetera, et cetera? And the answer is no, we're talking precisely in the context of what we're talking about right now.
Oh, and then Shane, when you said ISO, I had mixed up in my brain OSI. And so, but I see what you're saying. So we have both OSI and the Free Software Foundation's reference here, and that's
or
perfect.
similar license. And that definition of open source isn't intended to rewrite what open source is, but to reflect how companies tend to contextualize it in practice and in their discussions.
Okay.
Ultimately, of course, this supplier guide is intended for supplier companies that will ultimately be dealing with contracts. So they probably will be ending up with what's in the ISO standards and should be prepared.
Okay. Okay, Shane, thank you for that. So I'm going to put a thumbs up on it there. Any other comments before I move on? Okay, hearing none. I think this next one was, it gave an example, mostly referring to Linux, GCC, and the Apache server project. It may be basic for those on the call, but I think it's helpful for a lot of the audiences. I still talk to people who, these examples are helpful for. Okay. So the next one, I know we have some helpful like wording changes here. Perhaps can we just find agreement on these, and I'll accept them.
Sounds good.
Okay. I think the first was more of a stylistic change. I'm okay with it. So if does everyone else find that one okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to accept that. Okay. Thank you for our voters. In some cases, and I think again this is stylistic, but it makes it more kind of a narrative feel, and I like the way it sounds. Any other yay or nays?
Sounds good.
Okay. And yeah, I like the word exclude. If we're not speaking in, it's less legalese, I think. And I think that's the same with the rest of the changes in this paragraph. So I like all of these.
Who's actually going to be the recipient of this document? Is this going to be some legal departments, or is the main recipient a legal department, or rather a new build OSPO or something like that?
Very good question. In the previous iteration that the Japan work group made, the primary recipient would have been the company legal department via the procurement team. So fundamentally, it was positioned as a way for a customer company to bring to the procurement cycle questions like, are you aware of the ISO standard for open source license compliance? With the expectation that quite often procurement and legal would reply, no, and perhaps add, what's open source? And then the document, and they get the document and be told, look, ultimately we would prefer or require ISO 5230 conformance, and here's the material to explain open source and that standard. So fundamentally then procurement previously was primary target to feed into legal. But that could change. That's just the original position.
Okay. So I like the sound of exclude better, to be honest. But speaking from a legal perspective, I think we would be more safe with disclaim, since well, that's the usual terminus used by legals, right? Coming from at least from an IP perspective. But that's just a feel. Let's state it like that.
I think for this second paragraph and the third paragraph, I'm not really sure what the point is.
I think, yeah, you disclaim the whole liability paragraphs and the in most of the open source licenses speak of disclaiming liability. That's just a tiny thing, I think. But
yeah, I understand that.
So
I don't understand why that would be important for me to tell the supplier of my software.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
they might want to make sure back from them, maybe, and realize that they can't just pass on the responsibility. Maybe that's the point of that second paragraph. But you know.
Another point is I come from a German legal point of view, and we have a distinction between disclaiming something and excluding something. So in Germany, you can't disclaim liability for a software as far as the open source licenses are stated. So in Germany, if you provide any kind of open source software on an open source license, you're not able to disclaim the liability as general as the license states. But exclude is from a German legal point of view, stronger. So if you exclude something, you are actually able to exclude it. But if you just disclaim, you're not able to disclaim the whole liability. That makes it maybe a little bit more clearer, but I think the distinction is very small, and maybe just for German law. I'm not sure how it is in other countries, but therefore, I would rather stay with this claim. But just as I said before, it's just something I read in the licenses, right? Not something I could point a finger on.
I think, I guess from my point of view, I do see those two words paired together rather than exclude liability. Would it be okay if we kept disclaim and accepted the rest?
Yeah.
Okay. So, is that okay with everyone else?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here. So I'm going to keep disclaim. Okay. Yeah, and I like how that reads now. So thank you, everyone. This last one, I can hear my own copyright counsel giving me a 15-minute lecture on this one, but for this one, I more wondered if this was one we should drop, more considering that most of the open source issues are dealing with software that has a license attached to it and how to respect that license. It's not so much about, is this even copyrightable? I'm not sure that issue is as relevant. So while I think the edits here are helpful, my suggestion might be to drop this paragraph. But any thoughts from anyone on this one?
Just having a quick look again. Yeah, I think prudence suggests dropping it, and if someone says there's a gaping hole in my life, I need an extra bit here, then we can go back. But it doesn't look like it would cause any harm to drop it, and it might remove some twitchiness or room for misinterpretation.
Yes, I think better to drop it. If we don't drop it, I've got no idea where it should go and what it should say, but not there, and like that.
Okay. Any objections otherwise?
Nope.
Okay. I will say, I think it's a positive thing if we can narrow down content, because I know, like Shane, is this one intended for translation?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Just as you alluded, if we can make it as small as possible, the better.
Okay. All right, so what is granted by licenses? Copyright. If you don't mind, I'm going to take a look at the context here of what we're talking about. These two, I did wonder if these two were necessary as well.
It's kind of repetitive, right?
That's how it seemed to me too. Yeah. If it calls out copyright and patent as a issue to look at, but I don't think it goes into great depth. And to go into great depth would require a lot of you can write papers on these things. So I wonder if going straight into the typical open source license section might be most helpful.
I would agree.
Okay. Well, I think I'm hearing 2 votes. Any objections? Okay, hearing none, I think if it's okay, I'm going to click delete. In the spirit of saving our translators some time as well. Okay. Now here I wonder, Shane, did our earlier edition solve this one as well? And I will.
Maybe it did.
I don't think I can get both on the same page, but let me just scroll back just for a moment, just to show your suggestion here. So in the definition of open source, we refer to the OSI and the Free Software Foundation resources there. And then, yeah, back here, I think we actually did it. So
it looks like it.
Yeah. So any objections if we simplify again and rely on our earlier comment?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, so what do we need to do to receive the benefits of open source? Okay, and so it calls out, and I think from a very pragmatic point of view, to understand that most of the things you need to worry about operationally are in the distribution. I did make a suggestion at some point we could talk about hosting software. People feel that's helpful, but I think in a supply chain, I think the distribution is probably the most relevant issue. Okay, and I think this change here is stylistic, changing it to more active voice. So again, I think, thank you, Jacob. I'm inclined to accept this unless there's any objections.
No objection, but again, the first bullet point seems a bit strange. That's
okay.
Not a benefit as such.
Yeah.
For a start, it's not, again, as normal. It's not incorrect. I just doesn't quite fit there. Okay,
so maybe is it? You know what? I see what you're saying here, and I think maybe the main point is this: that anyone who distributes, if you're a distributor of the software, pay attention to this section, right?
That would be my reading of this and the purpose of the document, but I guess that's possibly just mine.
What if, okay, and I will suggest this. What if I erase what's highlighted and I'll say the obligations of open source licenses must be fulfilled? So, does that sound good, Shane? If I do this, and I'll start out the paragraph saying,
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yep.
Or is this an okay approach? And can we?
I think it is.
Okay.
I mean,
just seems to great with not great, but there's anyone who complies with the conditions of the license may freely use. It almost reads like there's a bit of duplication, but
that's true. I mean, it's very true that we keep coming back to the same points, but this is my own experience in dealing with companies that are relatively new to good process management on open source. I'm astonished if I don't have to repeat myself 10 times on every point.
Okay.
I have a thing to add here. I don't know if it makes sense or not, but the line that says the obligations of open source licenses must be filled by anyone who distributes the software, whether as an individual or a legal entity. I think what makes more sense is whether as an individual or an organization, because either a single person is working on the software and distributing it, or either an organization is launching the software. So, I mean, legal entity still, points towards something that's legal and not as a software developing organization, if it makes sense.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm just adding,
Yeah.
giving my viewpoint. I mean, it's not necessary to change it. I mean,
Okay.
so when I'm reading it, it's like whether as an individual or an organization that is selling the software.
Okay. Maybe
I see what you mean. So, for example, 2 individuals or a GitHub collection of people, that's not a legal entity,
Right.
and it's not an individual.
Yeah.
So, good point.
Okay.
One idea might be to move the final paragraph up to the top as a kind of introduction to all different ways that you can distribute software, given that that's the most important thing which it says one must take into account.
Okay. Ooh, I think I like that. Okay. All right, so let's move that up. I think we had some votes on that from the last one as well. Let's see here. Okay, so we're going to say there's several ways to distribute software. Give some examples. Okay, so then I think we can cut this one then. And then I will just start making changes, and then please jump in and object if in the following section. Now, I kind of think this is the next paragraph that should go. That. I'm just going to do some organization, if you don't mind. Does that sound okay here? I would think maybe I put this one at. I'm not sure this line belongs, but. I was going to suggest dropping this one here.
Can we use a better word than conditions? I mean, requirements or obligations. That is more that is more with a legal point of view.
Okay.
I mean, rather than conditions, it could be anything like requirements or obligations.
Okay. I think I might. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, requirements is probably a good word, because conditions in colloquial terms has the nuance of, but you don't really need to do it if you're a very unkind person.
How about this? I'll put requirements there. Can I delete this one here? I think that would be my suggestion. Yeah. Okay. So. And then I think we can delete this one here as well, this last line. So I will. Okay. Does that look good to everyone? All right, not hearing any
Sounds good.
objections. So, all right, and I'm gonna hold on to this in case we need to. We need to fix the agenda here. And I think I'm gonna drop my point about hosted software because I think this is about supply chain. So. All right, now up here we gave an example of selling a product that incorporates the open source software, and then providing a site from which it might be downloaded. And then we move into a section on examples of open source distribution. Now I think there's the value I see here is kind of what Shane mentioned. It's nice to make a point generally and then repeat it. I think so that the point will land.
That's also the Wikipedia house style as well. You every section in the article should have a corresponding sentence or paragraph in the lead.
Okay.
Although one thing I'd suggest on that, just kind of nitpicking on that first paragraph, is you've got open source software, but the sentence that starts it is just software, and of course, OpenChain is, for open source software primarily.
Okay. Yeah. Software.
No, it wasn't that. It was somewhere else. I'm a bit lost here, but
Was it a little higher? You said.
Yeah, that there at the very top there. There are several ways to distribute software. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but open source is.
Okay.
Because I think the important aspect for maybe a company going from proprietary software to open source software on a physical product is that it might not be obvious that the obligations extend to the box that you sell as well as the code that you put on it.
Okay.
The last line of this paragraph, some licenses have terms that affect what other, I mean, this is sounding a bit confusing, only to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not making some great sense.
That's actually, I
I
very
mean,
much agree.
I'm not able to understand it. If you could like explain or, I mean, reword it, it would be better because as an open source person, I am finding it difficult to understand. I don't think like.
I think I glossed over that one, so I agree with you.
No problem.
Require that a license notice. Others require a disclosure of the source code and written offer. I think I might suggest deleting that one because I think unless you have kind of a deeper example, I think what this is referring to is some of the licensing compatibility issues, right?
It's like
some people saying, GPL and Apache, for instance, trying to keep those apart or something like that. So maybe, are you okay if I delete this one? Everyone else?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
One way of putting it to just kind of raise awareness to the issue is, some licenses have mutually exclusive requirements, but this is often unintentional or something.
Mutually.
Or something like intercompatibility between different open source licenses.
Yeah, contradicting or something like that.
Well,
Wouldn't it be good to say something like, but this is usually unintentional, because generally people don't deliberately put licensing compatibilities into code?
Yeah.
I mean, I know there are some who do, but that's a
Yeah.
questionable practice.
I'm just trying to
I
think
think
of.
we can write it like another issue is the intercompatibility between different open source licenses, because only license here can we can think about some proprietary license as well, but we can reword it as another aspect of open source license. I mean the intercompatibility between the different license, or the incompatibility between different licenses. Open source licenses.
Yeah, well, I can tell, first of all, I think this is it is a fairly deep issue.
Yes. Yeah.
I
mean,
feel like
yeah,
unless we have a section to kind of
yeah,
call
I think
this
this
out a
is
little bit.
addressing it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be okay to stick with it, just to call out to say, watch out to make sure your requirements are compatible. And to the first point, I don't feel like this is very like a judgmental comment in terms of intentionality or anything, but mostly kind of factual to watch out for something. But I do have the feeling if we put in that, we might have to get into a little bit of history about what we're talking about. Yeah, Shane, what do you think is maybe a tie-breaking vote? What do you think we should do with this one? Sorry to give you the toughie, but
No. The thing is that I'm the stupidest person on the call, so I'm not sure I'm the right one to answer this. But I think the general look. I think the direction you're going in is good, and I think that if we are going to get a feedback that might be definitive on this, what we really need to do is throw it out to the main list or something, and just say, what do you think to them? Because I can't predict how people would respond.
Okay, maybe I'll throw out a question then.
Yeah, I'd say that sentence can't remain as it is, because it doesn't make any sense. Incompatible with what?
Good point.
Yes,
But,
a good point.
Couldn't we have, like, some licenses have contradicting? Well, I suppose that implies that the license is self-contradicting, with requirements that contradict other licenses.
A great point, Sebastian. Maybe, how about, I'm just typing in the chat because I'm going to say sometimes too.
Okay. And sorry, I think I've been missing some of the chat questions.
No. Nothing's really happening in the chat. Just I'm typing there now to help me think about what I'm going to say out loud. Okay, this is a very wordy way of putting it, and I'll put this onto the document itself as a potential comment if it's not insanely bad as an idea. Sometimes two different licenses have different sets of terms, or maybe I should say different sets of requirements, and they might contradict each other. So it's the same thing, just longer.
Yeah, that's nice.
Okay, I'm gonna examples of open source distribution.
But you can probably get rid of different just to squeeze a word out.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just putting this as a comment on the document itself now.
Okay.
I think my question. I mean, that's great text. I think my question would then be, well, what is someone supposed to do about
that? Panic.
Okay. I think let me put that in there, and then I'll reiterate my question about do we need a section on that then?
Yeah. I mean, that's such a hard question.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, there was a comment, maybe I should remove one of the difference in the suggestion, the sentence I suggested. The reason I didn't in my comment is because if I was translating it into Japanese, I'd use the different twice. So the object and then the action occurring with the object are both flagged, as they have two sets of complexity. Two different licenses have different sets of terms. So really that structure is there for translators as opposed to native or near native speakers.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of implicit things which don't translate well, I suppose.
Exactly. So the misunderstanding would be someone might read it and two open source licenses, and they say, but open source licenses are open source licenses. It's like, no, two different open source licenses.
Mm.
It
Okay.
really has to do with the fact that we don't have that stack of background knowledge to depend on. You know, people might have the most transitory awareness of what's going on here.
So I don't know if this is something which would be appropriate in this document, but when I'm reading technical documents which on subjects that I'm a beginner in, I like it when they say, and this is called with the technical term, and this is called license incompatibility. So that if I fancy looking it up in a Wikipedia or something to learn more, I at least know what to search for. But it does make it a lot more wordy because everything ends with, and this is called something or other.
I actually quite like this idea, but that's prejudiced by my dealing with the messy end of the, the supply chain. I don't know if it would be appropriate for slightly more knowledgeable areas of the supply chain.
Okay. Is there a way to capture this?
Would it be annoying for people to do that? Because I think it would be useful for some people, definitely. And just like Sebastian, when I'm doing something for the first time, I personally find it useful as well.
Yeah. Sebastian, I was just trying to make sure I understood or captured were you saying, should I add it, and this is called?
Exactly, yeah. And
like license compatibility or?
Well, in this case, it would be incompatibility, but yes.
Because
I think this is possibly a symptom of when reading stuff online, you don't know if it's going to be good or not first time. And what I tend to do is skim for the first time. And, if I don't see the keywords to hook onto, then I don't know if the website is kind of making it all up. Because whereas if they say license incompatibility and there are, hundreds of articles on it, I know it's onto something.
Okay. I like that. So thank you. Okay, so let's take a pass through this example section here. I don't have a lot of feedback from the prior meeting and the email list on this section. To me, I think the first half of this paragraph is helpful because it sets up the situation. But I wonder if the second half needs a little more. If we're really going to walk through an example of how to apply open source issues, that maybe more belongs in a section below. So I would suggest like cutting this from here and then maybe even reusing the example down below might be better.
So if this is like absolute beginners for open source licensing, that does seem a bit more complex than the section that it's in.
Okay. Just move and
the other question is, do we since the recipients of this document are the legal departments, do they actually have to know the difference between an SDK or whether it was developed in a software development kit or through an OEM or ODM? I think this will some legals, at least, it will overload them with information that they don't necessarily need, because what's the outcome of the sections of these examples? The outcome is always the same. Before distribution, you need to comply with the open source licenses. You need to check them either way.
Yeah, I think I agree, especially considering the term SDK is like really popular in some industries, like embedded, and then in other parts of the software industry aren't even used at all.
Yeah, I think maybe the intention was just to take distribution and then turn it into a set of applied cases, right? Like, okay, so for your, let's call out some words that mean distribution, and it might be this case for you. But I wonder, is it better? Maybe could we instead of this narrative give some bullet point examples of, distributing an SDK or something like that? Would that, or I don't know. I think what the word
be better.
Yeah.
I think it would make things easier for the legal departments because well, I know what it is, but I'm the one working in this section, right? If I would show one of my colleagues this term, software development kit, they would just look at me and say, okay, what's that? And but the thing you want to teach them is that you always have to comply with the licenses. You need to know what's inside your product, and you need to comply with the licenses. So the way how you do it is not that important, at least not at this stage.
Okay, I think to me this is more about, these paragraphs are more about the how. Again, discuss how below. But I do think it's useful to have like keywords for, maybe you're not familiar with the SDK in the legal department, but it's good to call out that, watch out for when SDKs are distributed. No, that's the keyword where software, that's the distribution point you should maybe pay attention to. Same with number 2 here is saying, watch out when your ODM is creating the platform for you and you're redistributing it under your own brand. Know that you're responsible for that as well. So
expanding on that a bit more, isn't one of the points about an SDK that by its marketing, it's not kind of obvious that you're including it in the thing you sell, because it's meant to be a kit, right? That it's actually a. I mean, I personally think it looks as if the term SDK is falling out of fashion anyway. So would library be a more appropriate term, or are people still using SDK a lot in some industries?
Yeah, I feel I still see it, and if there's SDK, or we could add some other terms, and it's almost like the more simplistic examples are moved to section 3. Yeah, I think if we move some of the hows down below, I think this becomes more like I think this will land a little bit better. If does that sound okay if I go with that approach? I know we're near the end of time, so if we're okay with that approach, I'll take that as homework, and and make a suggestion that we can comment on.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
All righty. Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I think
We'll
I
wrap
don't
up
think we have
here.
time to wrap up into a new section. So why don't I will once again say thank you, and thank you to Shane for covering the beginning of this. Apologize for dropping in late. So
No, that's just brilliant, Nathan. Thank you. This is going to be a great document for the community, and thank you for everyone who contributed. I'll talk to you all soon.
okay, sounds great. All right.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yeah, bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.